Yeah. All right. One more question about your history, the past, right? And then we'll switch gears and start talking about what's going on at NervGen and how you're navigating those waters. But probably probably the most the household name, if you will, that you're probably most well known for is the development and commercial availability of Narcan, right? I mean, everybody knows what that is. I'm assuming you played a role in its sale to Emergent for a princely sum. So tell me about that. Like that's another. I'm assuming that's another big inflection point in your career that sort of inspired, informed, provided some direction as to what came next. Tell me a little bit
Sure.
about that experience.
Yeah, so actually the team that I talked about that was at Azure earlier prior to COVID was the team that started the development or in-licensed and continued the development of Narcan. And when I was finishing up my term at Covis, I talked to the CEO, founder CEO, Seamus Mulligan, who has been a mentor of mine throughout my career, about joining the team. And I was trying to finish things at Covis, but had an eye on helping Narcan. So when I got there, they had the framework of a pretty solid team in the U.S. marketplace. And I think the biggest transition was number one, stepping into that role, getting to know the people who are currently on the team, but then number two, figuring out the product and how to navigate the waters, and then number three, continuing to build out the team to execute. It was really all about operational execution at that stage. The company had been trailing a competitor in the FDA review process, and the competitor got a complete response letter. So they went from bridesmaid to bride in overnight. And now, there's a very different strategy when you are planning to follow somebody versus planning on leading the way. So we had to pivot very quickly and figure it out. We knew that we had a device and a drug that could save lives. What we didn't know is, well, how are we going to get it into the hands of people who could save those lives? And the most logical first step for us was, well, the first people on a scene of an overdose are police. Mm-hmm. And they're not trained. They're not trained medically to treat people, nor do they want to. That's not their job. Right. So we actually had to knock down a lot of barriers to allow police to carry the product without a prescription and deliver it to somebody who they thought might be having an overdose. So there was a lot of political things that we had to work on. So it was a combination of knocking down political barriers, but also then convincing groups who typically don't do things that they should be doing things. And then once we got an anchor in the police departments across the country, the product just started to take off, and they realized, okay, well, if police, can save lives, anybody could save lives. And the product just took off. We were finding different ways and different avenues just to get as much of this stuff out as we possibly could, because we knew that every 10 units we sold, we were likely going to save at least one life. Mm-hmm. So we were, I told folks the analogy, we were building the car and driving it 100 miles an hour. So we were building the company, and we were trying to sell as much of this product as we could. And we did a great job of it. But I think at the end of the day, when we had discussions with Emergent, they were a much bigger company, much more resources. They were well connected in the public space, the public health space, mm-hmm. With all of the work that they have done with the anthrax vaccination and anthrax, all of their government, public-private partnerships really took the product to the next level. So when it was kind of bittersweet to sell the product because we were doing extremely well. Yeah. But I think the management team at the time realized, okay, well, we're never going to get it to where they can get it. And, yeah. Sure, we sold it for a decent product, but I think everybody was happy that, when we left it in their hands, and most of my team stayed there. When we left it in their hands, my team combined with their team, and they took it. They actually almost doubled it from where we got it, and it's saved many, many lives today. So it was a phenomenal turning point in my career.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a product like Narcan and the path that last mile to the patient, if you will, much different scenario than any you're going to see in biologics or most small molecules, obviously. Yet we've had plenty of conversations on this podcast around like, okay, we have a drug that made it through phase 3. The FDA approved it. We're, celebrating. The champagne bottles are popping. And then 18 months down the road, that product's no longer on the market because the execution of its commercial availability and use just completely falls flat on its face for myriad reasons, right? It fails. In this case, you had to develop a plan that was unlike any plan that probably had ever been executed in terms of that last mile to the patient. You did it. And as I said, recognizing that that's, there probably isn't a very clean parallel to biologics or the products that you're working on now. I'm curious about how that win and that fortitude and that problem solving that you exercised during the Narcan rollout, how does that translate to your commercial perspective now? Like, you're working obviously with different players. You're not working through municipalities and police departments and trying to get people to, add this to your tool belt while you're on the beat. But the lessons, right, and the like I said, fortitude that it took. Do you find that it translates, or is it just like, well, that happened and it's completely removed from what I'm doing today?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it absolutely translates. I think the biggest translating factor that we are doing here, that we did there, is the people. Nothing in the pharmaceutical industry is traditional anymore. In my mind, there's no 4,000 sales reps on the street selling feature benefit incentive, right? It's that the commercial world is turned on its head. The payer world has been, very, very strong. So it really boils down to the team that you hire in order to execute and deliver. And that team isn't just your commercial team. That team is your clinical team, your development team, your regulatory team, your CMC team, your tech ops team. So those learnings the common thread throughout my career is just I've been extremely fortunate to work with really smart people and bring smart people into organizations because and not just smart, intelligent, smart, but smart, motivated, smart. Like, give you an example, Narcan, right? We had a guy who was head of marketing, and I said to him, listen, I know you want to be head of marketing, but PR is much more powerful than marketing here. And I had to kind of teach him that
more powerful and with a product like that necessary. Right?
That's right. And so rather his mindset was, well, he wanted to run marketing. I'm like, well, why don't you focus on running PR? Like, yeah, that is like, and he changed his thinking, right? And so he applied his skill set, but it was just a different approach. The same goes for trade and distribution. Our head of trade and distribution was a traditionalist, right? He's sold traditional products for GSK and other companies through third-party logistics companies. But if he didn't have the ability to think differently about how to distribute product directly to a Department of Health and set up a network that people could sign into a website and order it, and we would ship it locally and bill centrally and have master prescriptions written. He developed that. He learned that. It wasn't a cookie cutter. We couldn't find that role. So those skills, I think, translate into any other job that we have. And that's what I'm bringing, I believe, to NervGen. We're going to treat spinal cord injury. No one's really ever succeeded here. There's new paths that we have to pave. And if we don't have smart people, but people who could think differently about how to create a path, we're just going to be a traditional pharmaceutical company. Right. And that you can't be that if you're 12 people working virtually across the United States.
Yeah.
So that's what's translatable. Translatable is pulling a group of people together that are extremely smart, that can actually be motivated enough, and generalists, I call them generalists, to be able to work without a net, and to make decisions and to fail and to succeed and to, fail again and succeed. It's that type of mindset in every department that we have.
Yeah.
Finance, I'll give you an example. Our CFO he's a great guy. He's worked in both Canada and the US. Not a lot of CFOs have. We are a public company in Canada. We're 75% held by retail. That's not typical. Typical biotech path is you have 4 institutional investors that are carrying you all the way. We're not there yet. We may get there. We may never get there. But to be 70% retail, 80% retail at this stage of our life, you need a CFO who's going to think differently than a traditional, somebody who's going to go to the top 15 institutions in the US. We have to go into the high net worth groups. We have to go into retail. We have to straddle the fence. But that's just one example of the types of people we are bringing into this organization and have at this organization. Our, chief medical officer is the same way. He came from a large company and now he's working. It's him and one other person in our clinical department. He's came from Amgen. Not many people could do that. Could oversee. It's great to have the title chief medical officer, but now he's running clinical operations. He's overseeing data management. He's doing things that typical chief medical officers don't do.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. It's really the people on the team that you put behind things that are consistently successful.
Yeah. The breadth of his responsibilities is probably considerably more than it was at Amgen. I'm sure he did great work there too, but probably a lot more.
Brilliant mind that is now doing different things in his career that I don't think he probably ever expected he'd be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got some questions for you on people that we're going to get to here in just a minute.
Sure.
More, some more of the NervGen roster. But before we go there, I want to talk about peptides for a minute. Like I want to spend some time talking about that. It's kind of funny. Like, I was looking at you guys thinking like, does this fit? Does this fit for the Business of Biotech podcast? And I recalled a conversation I had with the VP of content, effectively my boss here. I don't know, like a year ago. And he was like, so for context, the Business of Biotech and Bioprocess Online is we focus on biologics. Like we focus on large molecule therapeutics, development and manufacture of large molecule therapeutics. And he came to me and he was like, hair on fire. He's like, GLPs. Because, like any publication, like any publishing industry, like we want to latch on to something that's, going to get clicks, right? Going to get eyeballs. And GLPs were it. And I was like, yeah, man, I don't know. Like, I don't think they fit. I don't think these peptides are a fit with, like, if we're going to stay true to our large molecule, existence, I don't think they fit. And it's ironic because I'm the first guy to break the rules. Like I'll color outside the lines any chance I get. And as time has kind of carried on here, like I said, I mean, sometimes the FDA treats them like a biologic. Sometimes, depending on how big the chain of amino acids is, whatever criteria they apply sometimes. So I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and spend more time learning about and covering peptide therapeutics potentially as biologics, right? Like they're biotechs that are building them. Let's just do it. So give me your take. Like, and I've got, we could probably go long on this. Your take on starting with your perspective on taking the job at NervGen, right? Like, was this something that you're like, well, was it the indication opportunity? Was it the therapeutic where you're like, these peptides are kind of catching on. It's a cool modality. Like, what led you into this role? And since you've been in the role, give me your take on sort of the peptide. I don't want to call it a revolution. I mean, like I said, a few approvals a year. It's still sort of nascent, but there's a lot of excitement around peptides.
Yeah. I to be fully transparent, when I was looking at this opportunity, I looked at the peptide and I said, wow, this is going to be challenging. because peptides are challenging. They're not easy. They're not easy to manufacture consistently. They're not easy to, purify. There's only a handful of manufacturers in the world who can do it well. And I have no experience in peptide manufacturing. So
Yeah.
that was, to me, one of the things I said, okay, well, I look at companies of our size and I look at where they fail and where they fall down. And a lot of them fall down in manufacturing. A lot of complete response letters over the last several years. They do everything perfect clinically, but they either can't make the stuff consistently, or they can't, or if they do and they get approval, they just fail on the launch side. So I got over that by talking to some colleagues that I've worked with in the past who know peptides, know how to manufacture peptides. And it's not rocket science, but you have to have the right people and the right partners to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I view NVG-291 as a handful of amino acids behind becoming labeled a biologic.
Mm-hmm.
And biologics are just as challenging. The formulation development. And so I'm actually learning a lot. And one of the gentlemen that came into our organization, Chuck Olson, he's teaching me. He's our head of tech ops, and he's forgotten more about peptides and biologics and manufacturing than I'll ever know in my entire life. And that I have to trust that he knows what he's doing. I mean, I'm a pretty good verifier if somebody's BSing me, but Chuck is the one who's going to get this product manufactured and quality controlled and approved by the FDA, that we can consistently make it over time. So is it an in vogue space? Yeah, I mean, I think, you mentioned it earlier. It's in vogue because of a lot of what Lilly and Novo Nordisk are doing right now, right?
Yeah.
But that's cyclical. I think it's and I think it's in vogue because of everything that they're doing, but they have the know-how. They know how to work in this space. Not a lot of folks do. If they are small molecule companies, they're going to have to bolt on the expertise of managing and working in the peptide space, because manufacturing them is not a simple process, and there's a handful of people. Like I said, there's a handful of people that can do it. You can tweak a small manufacturing process and have a massive impact on your yields or your effectiveness or your toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
So your decision making then really has to be very, very fine tuned, and you make decisions and stick with them. Because once you're too far down the path, sure, you could always improve upon something, but you may tweak something that sends you all the way back to preclinical.
Yeah.
So it's an art and a science mixed when you're in the peptide space.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you some more questions about the work Chuck is doing here in a minute. But I want to take the conversation around peptides more narrowly into neuro now. So, you talk about it was, I was unaware of the fact that Narcan was a Me Too player, or an also ran before it became the crown jewel, right? Like that was news to me.
Well, it was second. It was new. It was always new and novel. The delivery was always new and novel, but there was just another player who had a similar type of delivery, but they picked the wrong dose, and their clinical trials didn't work out as well. Yeah. So that's why they got the complete response letter. But so I just wanted to make sure it wasn't that they were, we were very different from them. We were very close to them. It's just that we jumped and leapt ahead of them.